Speaker.
My name's
Kate Adams. I'm from Kent Refugee Help. It's a charity that helps people who are designated as foreign national prisoners, people like Osime Brown. The charity I work for was set up by grassroots people, helping people in immigration detention, and then we moved on to helping people in prison. The charity I work for gives full support for the case of Osime Brown, and I connected with Joan when I read about it on the internet, and she came and spoke at a webinar we set up, which was called Claiming Asylum and Seeking Justice in a Hostile Environment. We're particularly helping people with legal advice about challenging deportation and making referrals to lawyers. It's very hard for people to get help in prison, as there's no access to legal aid lawyers. There's nothing, basically. A lot of people are totally unrepresented. I learned at a meeting a couple of days ago that 500,000 people have suffered having no advice and representation because of the legal aid cuts in 2012. And those legal aid cuts have denied people in Osime's position the legal representation to challenge their deportation. And there are many people who have been separated from their children and partners just because they committed an offence, with no backup. I've met young people like Osime in prison who were granted refugee status and then got into trouble because they were unsupported, they didn't have their parents. They identify as British. There are also people like Osime who've lived here for a very long time, who came with their families, who feel British. They can't understand what the Home Office is doing to them. We're also coming across asylum seekers who came across the channel and are in prison. It's so shameful. They're also unrepresented. So we're giving legal advice to those people. We've now got some money to give legal advice. We can't take on the cases. We're trying to find lawyers for them. The threshold for automatic deportation, actually something that's brought in by the Labour Party. I'm a member of the Labour Party. I rejoined the Labour Party to challenge these kind of things, as well as to support Jeremy Corbyn, who's actually an anti-racist leader that the Labour Party have now got rid of. The threshold for automatic deportation, if you commit a criminal offence, was 12 months. If you had a sentence of 12 months, you fell into that category of being automatically deported. It's now been changed to 6 months. So, it's a lower threshold. More people are falling into that category. And this sends the message that black and immigrant people are criminals that we don't want here. That's rubbish. Black lives matter. Migrant lives matter. We're all one world. It's outrageous. It's a highly divisive, highly political decision, as was the decision to place asylum seekers in accommodation, military barracks. It's in the kind of next town from where I live in Kent, in Whitstable, Folkestone, Napier Barracks, unfit for human habitation, not compliant with COVID, and there are documents show, and impact assessments show, the Home Office did that because they're appealing to bigotry and racism in people in the hope that will increase more votes for the Tory government. That's why that decision was made, these highly political decisions. Osime's campaign highlights that there's no care and compassion for black people, migrant people, inside the prison system or outside. I've seen what happens to people with disabilities in prison. I was recently working with a man who couldn't get a wheelchair, couldn't get a commode, was crying on the phone to me saying he felt suicidal. But this doesn't just affect black and migrant people, it affects all of us. Because once that threshold is lowered for decency and human rights, every one of us can't get the basic things we need. It's an outrage. This wonderful campaign has highlighted so many injustices, and so many places where people's needs intersect and collide. I'm so impressed with Joan and with Emma. So often women in the families of black and migrant people, and other working class people, as the other speaker said, fight, you know, it's very exhausting. Joan said to me every day, she's living that grief, but she's energised her grief into a political campaign. I'm so full of admiration. And as I said, Black Lives Matter, Migrant Lives Matter. Osime must say, I'm so fantastic to be with all of you.